via Sutter, colpo di testa in rete, Hassan porta in vantaggio il Lecce.
Here's Crawford, a chance, it's the only goal for Rovers.
It wasn't hyperbolic to say that the 90s was a torrid time to be a Celtic fan. Not only had Rangers matched their feat of 9 titles in a row, but Celtic had offered virtually no opposition and teetered on the brink. Then Martin O'Neill showed up and revived them. Even with the new firm, even with Graham Souness's revolution at Ibrox, Celtic had still been the preeminent team of the past generation of Scottish football by the time the 90s rolled around. Billy McNeill's time at the club was over by 91, his successor needed to be chosen carefully and correctly amid an always improving Rangers. So when Celtic opted to hire Liam Brady, a legendary footballer but still 35 years of age and entering into his first football manager job nonetheless, it was a quizzical move. From the unimaginative return of Charlie Nicholas to the underperforming Gary Gillespie and Tony Cascarino, for every high note that Rangers hit in the transfer market, Celtic were consistently making the opposite decisions. Only a miraculously good end to the season dredged Celtic into a European position come the end of the 91-92 campaign, a season where they finished some 10 points back on champions Rangers. But that wasn't the low point, nor was being eliminated by Rangers in the Scottish Cup or even their loss on penalties to Airdronians in the League Cup. No, it was this.
Non è in posizione di offside, come a torto ritenevano i giocatori del Celtic. Ancora ha dibattuto la palla alla trasversale, ancora Bovè di testa, gol! Vi avevamo detto prima, il passaggio per Osama Hassan ed è gol, clamoroso! Attenzione però il pericoloso Coin, passaggio dalla parte opposta e la palla in rete di rigore. Bovè in buona posizione, il tiro, attenzione, ancora gol!
Going out in the second round of the UEFA Cup was no longer embarrassing, but it was when it was done so convincingly by such a poor team. So when you've won nothing all season and endured a bit of a shit show, it's important for the board to get the fans back on side. Naturally, this board announced plans for a new stadium, shunning the idea of redeveloping Parkhead. They went for the nuclear option and the fans were not happy. Their patience with the Kelly family had gone, even more so when another poor third place finish was teamed with yet more embarrassing cup exits. The 2-0 aberration at Falkirk in the Scottish Cup 4th round this time being the most humiliating. There was a good night in Europe though to be had this season.
Chance it on this time! With John Collins. The deflection! It's a goal! Good play by Collins. He's made it!
But that was the long and short of it. Eventual UEFA Cup finalist Borussia Dortmund comprehensively disposed of Celtic in the very next round, and there was no shame in that. The following season unravelled with supporters already pissed off with the jungle turning into an all-seater part of the stadium. Then, when only 2 of their first 11 matches were won, prompting Liam Brady's resignation, there was open revolt. Celts for Change was formed as Lou Macari steadied the ship for a time, but only temporarily, as Celtic finished a morbid 4th place and without Europe. Not that they wouldn't have gone out in the second round for the 4th successive season anyway, sporting this time the perpetrators of Celtic. This time so much for the Lisbon Lions. The club was skirting dangerously towards a possibility of administration until Fergus McCann pitched up with the money on March the 4th, 1994. Tommy Burns was installed as a Celtic manager ahead of the new season, fresh with optimism as the club once again shat it in the league, finishing a distant 4th in a campaign where the club had to use Hampden owing to the belated development to Parkhead. Handed to them, presumably on a silver platter, Rafe Rovers. Surely to God, this was the shot in the arm that the club needed, a nice easy win to get back on the board. And this happened.
Here's Crawford, a chance! It's the only goal for Rovers! Another chance on this time, must be the equaliser! Here goes Nicholas, that's Walker! Played by Deere. Chance on here for the equaliser! But he has! Rafe Rovers have won the Coca-Cola Cup!
Because if finishing 4th and not being in Europe whilst Rangers pretty much won the lot wasn't miserable enough for you, here's rock bottom, a loss against Rafe pissing Rovers in the League Cup final on penalties. Fret not, Pierre van Hooijdonk was signed as Celtic squeaked through the Scottish Cup all the way to the final to play in yet another Hampden game, and he saved his most famous Celtic goal for the very last game of the season. They'd returned to Celtic Park with a dog-shit front line but a decent enough defence. On such foundations, good teams can be built. With a trio of Paul McStay, John Collins and Van Hooijdonk, Andreas Thom and Jackie McNamara were signed. Once again, the Hoops had the best defence in the league, but they had improved drastically in attack, losing just one game. Ultimately though, it was at home to Rangers in the 5th match of the season, and given the 4-point deficit come the end of the campaign, that plus 3 further draws against their rivals proved the difference. Rangers had their number in both cup competitions, making it 6 Old Firm matches and not a single victory, and while Celtic returned to Europe, it was yet another second round defeat, although this time more understandably against Paris Saint-Germain, who went on to win the competition. They were inching closer and closer to league success and another second place finish, this time with a 5-point deficit which could once again be traced back to the Old Firm matches. Once again Celtic didn't win one, instead losing all 4. Had they drawn 3 and lost 1 like the prior season, they'd have won the title. They did have Rangers' number in the quarterfinals of the Scottish Cup though, a 2-0 quarterfinal win, only to piss that promise up against the wall when they couldn't dispatch of Falkirk over 2 games in the semi-final. It was a trophyless season in which Hearts beat them after extra time in the League Cup, and they even bowed out before the second round of European competition, this time to Hamburg. They had a talent like Paolo Di Canio and Alan Stubbs, but then you looked across the city and saw Rangers were acquiring talent like Brian Laudrup and Paul Gascoigne. It was hard to see a way back for Celtic. Then, Tommy Burns was sacked. In a season where it was imperative for Celtic to do well, if not for ending a league drought but for stopping Rangers from acquiring title number 10 in a row, this had been the most disastrous of starts. Wim Jansen had taken over from Tommy Burns, and already by mid-August there was consternation. Both league games had been lost. They needed to pull back a deficit in the UEFA Cup qualifying against little old Tyrol Innsbruck, and had needed extra time to eliminate St Johnstone from the League Cup. Scottish talent in Darren Jackson from Hibs and Craig Burley from Chelsea had been teamed with continental class in Sheffield Wednesday's Reggie Blinker in exchange for Paolo Di Canio, as well as a certain striker from Feyenoord. He was called Henrik Larsson. After a 2-0 win in Perth in the league, Celtic were afforded 3 weeks off, partly due to the international break and partly due to the death of Princess Diana. Make your own jokes here, but her death couldn't have come at a better time, since it postponed the usual early Old Firm derby against Rangers until mid-November, giving Celtic time to turn things around. When that fixture arrived, Celtic had booked themselves in for a League Cup final. They'd taken a strong Liverpool team the distance in Europe and had only gone out on away goals, and they had strung together 8 consecutive wins in the league. It also allowed the club time to bring in Borussia Dortmund's Paul Lambert. He arrived equidistant between 2 Old Firm games, neither of which were won, and so Celtic slipped behind Rangers and into 3rd. In a dress rehearsal for the League Cup final, Celtic got back to winning ways with a 4-0 thrashing of Dundee United. Now, it was time for Hampden.
Horse picked out his compatriot Mark Reaper, who powered his header into the net via the upright, deflected off Maurice Malpas's boot past the unfortunate Steve Dykstra. Reggie Blinker finding Craig Burley, apparently onside, who headed...
Cup finals are always important, but, especially against lesser opposition, League Cup finals can feel secondary. Not this one. This one was crucial in grabbing some much-needed momentum ahead of the festive period and the New Year's derby with Rangers. Momentum attained 10 points from 4 matches. Celtic put their feet up on Christmas Day, only 1 point off the Rangers' pace after 18 games. Then a trip to Perth undid quite a lot of that hard work. The visit of Rangers to Parkhead was now must win.
Rangers, you feel, are here for the taking. It's Craig Burley! That's Lambert! What a way for Zetland! Paul Lambert
And they did win, cutting the deficit back to 1 with 16 matches left on the clock. Whilst Rangers' Marco Negri had been scoring at such a stupid rate of knots, Celtic added their own European firepower that December with Rosenborg's Harald Brattbakk, but it would be a certain Swede who had dazzled Parkhead. The Hoops would only be deterred by trips to Fir Park and Tynecastle, dropping 4 points in advance of March. As such, a 4-point gap to Rangers had opened up, with Jim Jeffrey's Hearts still in the race, wedged in between. Progress had been made beyond Morton, Dunfermline and Dundee United, prompting an Old Firm doubleheader to begin April in a time where nerves were being frayed at both ends of the city. Hearts had held Celtic at Parkhead, so the title race was almost as you were heading into April. Celtic leading the league with 6 to play, 2 ahead of Hearts, 3 ahead of Rangers. The Old Firm tests were next.
Tested Celtic already once with a driven shot. This one's McCoist's! Right, McCoist's gone through the middle. He's not going to need any of them. He's going to go all the way. A magnificent goal from...
Suggestions, but Swedish international Jonas Thern had his own idea for breaking the deadlock. Been seriously challenged until he was within shooting range. Then the finish. Ibrox erupted.
Both of which flunked. Celtic had not only paved the way for Hearts and Rangers to go at it in the Scottish Cup final, but they had handed the title initiative to their rivals on a silver platter. 4 games to go, Celtic and Rangers were level on points. Instantly there was a chance to put the pressure on, which was successful with a bizarrely serene 4-1 thrashing of Motherwell. 24 hours later, Rangers buckled at Pittodrie, swinging the title back to Parkhead. There was more than one sting to this tale though. 6 days later, as Celtic couldn't buy a goal against relegation-threatened Hibs at home. Meanwhile, Rangers' impressive 3-0 triumph at Tynecastle put just 1 point between the sides. May the 2nd was Rangers' turn to put the pressure on, a presumed gimme at home to Kilmarnock, while Celtic visited Dunfermline the following day.
Remarkable 9 titles. That was in 1989 and 1998. The Ibrox stranglehold in Scottish football has been all but ended by Ali Mitchell's goal 3 minutes into injury time.
Ali Mitchell with the killie goal that devastated Ibrox. Now Celtic found themselves 90 minutes at East End Park away from stopping 10 in a row. Just one win, didn't matter who, didn't matter how, one win and it was all over.
There's a dunk. Taken up well by Janssen. There's a run through again. That's it. Celtic have scored. Now he's kicking every ball. Like an orchestra leader there. And that is just drifting. Oh, it's in. It's a goal. Dunfermline.
It wasn't fucking over. Enter Helicopter Sunday before Helicopter Sunday. 7 small minutes away, Celtic were from the title when Craig Falconbridge spooned one into the net. When people expected a Larson or a McCoist, they received Mitchell and Falconbridge. Celtic hosted St Johnstone, Rangers travelled to Tannadice. Celtic just needed to match the Rangers result. It seemed bananas then, just as it does today, that neither game was shown live on domestic television.
Is alongside him. Larson lining up for the shot. What a start for Celtic!
Knew that if Celtic won at home to St Johnstone, all would be lost. The Rangers still emerged victorious at Dundee United to make it 2-0. Zetterman, a looping header, beating the Finnish international Antti Niemi in the Rangers goal.
It's a good pass. In for Brattbakk! He's done it!
After 10 long years, Harald Brattbakk with a goal that summed it all up. There was no 10 in a row. Had it not been for that fact, it would have been quite a middling title performance. Wim Janssen came, saw, conquered and fucked off. From the minutest of peaks, Celtic came crashing back down to earth with the hiring of Josef Venglos, a Czech manager who hadn't worked in British football since the beginning of the 90s with Aston Villa and was a decade further on from his managerial peak. And it showed. At least he stayed with recent Celtic traditions in going out of not just 1 but 2 second rounds in European competition. First in the 2nd qualifying round to Dynamo Zagreb in the Champions League, and then in the UEFA Cup 2nd round to FC Zurich. Edgeronians proved a first hurdle stumbling block in the League Cup, and whilst it took a while for the team to kick on, they almost haired back to the precipice of the Championship, but for a 2-week dip against St Johnstone and, terminally, Rangers on May the 2nd. Further heartache followed against the same team in the Scottish Cup final, plunging Celtic supporters' moods down further. The signings were no longer working. Whilst Mark Viduka scored prolifically in the 99-2000 season, Celtic missed Henrik Larsson massively. In a time where Parkhead needed more Stilian Petrov, they received plenty of shite. Raphael Shite, to be precise. Steering the club through the shit show of the 99-2000 season was a novel idea. Novel because it didn't work. Kenny Dalglish and John Barnes as joint managers. Whilst the League Cup was won against Aberdeen, they also masterminded the 3-1 home defeat in the third round of the Cup to Inverness Cali Thistle, combined with a now traditional European second round exit this time to Leon under 21 point deficit in the SPL. Celtic were quickly discarded with. To ensure that Rangers couldn't build up another head of steam again, Celtic needed to make their next decision count. A Celtic fan in his youth, Martin O'Neill, had enormous pedigree either side of the white line. A European Cup winner with Nottingham Forest, his work in turning Leicester City into cup winners in the Premier League age was nothing short of miraculous. The new man got his initial signings absolutely on the money. First through the door was Chris Sutton, looking delighted here by the way, as Mark Viduka moved south. Jos Valgaeren was a shrewd acquisition for the defence, Alan Thompson the same from Villa from the midfield. A whole new spine with the returning Henrik Larsson from injury. Parkhead had a whole new lease on life.
And Stubbs and Larsson are there! Taking a second, Moravcik sends it in! And they have... And they're queuing up here! It's another one for... Larsson, oh he's in! Henrik Larsson! Tessa delivers, Larsson's header! He's done it again! Now Celtic got another one left in them. Sutton is there! Yes they have!
And if it didn't before this, it certainly did afterwards. After, quite simply put, the best old firm league game from a Celtic perspective, O'Neill's side simply carried on in the same vein. 4-1 on the spin, 3-1 after, and only 4 points dropped in advance of the second Old Firm game of the season. To avoid the viewership dropping like a stone, we won't show you that one, but just know that Rangers only managed the 5, as Celtic sat a staggering 12 points ahead of their rivals anyway, i.e. the league was wrapped up in O'Neill's first season and it wasn't even December yet. In fact, they would drop only 4 points from their next 19 matches. It wasn't a title win, it was a bloody massacre. And with the season all wrapped up, there was the offering of a treble too. Not in Europe, of course, you can already guess which stage they went out in already there, without me telling you. Obviously, the second round. No, Hampden awaited.
Apart from that, he's been quite excellent. They're all in there, that's it. Henrik Larsson was screaming for it, but he led wide. Does he? A bit of hat-trick coming up. It is.
It had been a mesmeric season as Celtic kept winning on the field and off the field with their transfers. Neil Lennon and Didier Agate both added as O'Neill's strike rate never let up. If the 15-point deficit to Rangers had been a bloody massacre in 01, the following season's tally of 103 points was downright dominant. The fact that their rivals got 85 points and still didn't come anywhere close was now the yardstick. And sure, Rangers were able to claim Celtic's number in both of the domestic cups, but for the first time in a long time, Celtic had kinda become relevant on the continental scene once again. For the first time, they had made it to the Champions League group stages and had a good hit list, including former European champions in Ajax, Porto and Juventus, before being funnelled into the UEFA Cup, where only penalties stopped them from going through against the last 2 finalists of the Champions League, Valencia. Everything geared up for another monumental European campaign ahead of the 2002-03 season. Whilst it was embarrassing to be dumped out of the Champions League qualifiers by some no-name Swiss side, the world, and especially Britain, would come to get acquainted with FC Basel fairly quickly, as they got results against both Liverpool and Man United that season. Ultimately, they'd be knocked out on away goals, and soon enough, it would be known as quite the blessing in disguise. Not to the domestic campaign, Rangers swept up both cup trophies before one of the more caricatured title races ever seen. In terms of head-to-head results, with Rangers, Celtic shaded it, winning the last two whilst the first was drawn and the Light Blues won the second in December. With another 100-point season just about feasible, Celtic slipped up just the once away to Hearts on April the 19th, but it was still recoverable. Rangers were beaten, then it became all about goal difference. 4 beyond Dunfermline and Motherwell, 6 beyond Dundee, and on the final day another 4 stuck beyond Kilmarnock. 97 points, 98 goals scored, plus 72 goal difference in any other season, any other league, it'd be enough. A final day that had started with the team split by 1 goal scored whilst holding the same amount of wins, draws, losses and goal difference. Celtic scored 4, conceded none, Rangers conceded 1. But scored 6. By 1 solitary goal the season was over, and come the end of the campaign it was one that didn't contain a single piece of silverware to show for it. All that hard work that had been carved out back home, but it didn't even begin to tell half the story of Celtic's 2002-03 season.
Sutton put it up well, Petrov. That must be this time, surely yes. Hodgson does it again. Healy flowing forward, there's a chance, David Fernandez, he's going to lob the goalkeeper, and it's in. John Hodgson up! Oh, what a save by Cleveland, Henry Larsson was there! To Agat, and now Chris Sutton, can he, oh, Hodgson slipped, oh, Henrik Larsson, surely, for Celtic! That is a very good ball indeed, and it just got away, it's in!
That was the free kick. Chris Sutton timed his jump well. John Hodgson! Celtic have equalised!
Thompson and Sedison and now Paul Maloney with a chance. He's done it!
One is Hodgson. Another is Alan Thompson, who heads Celtic in front.
From the barely noticeable Lithuanians of round 1, the cocky English press that backed Blackburn in round 2 to the first difficult nut to crack in Celta Vigo in the third round, Celtic were through to the other side of Christmas for once. When Kevin Karanye silenced Parkhead inside of half an hour, Celtic wouldn't have believed they would have the tie all neatly wrapped up in a bow by the 11th minute back in Stuttgart in the 4th round. Next was Liverpool and a quarter-final. It was Celtic's third attempt at dispatching of the English side in Europe. The first in '66 they had lost because of a wrongful offside call. The second in '97 was only down to away goals. The third time...
Presence of John Armstrong, surely try to get as much balls into John as they possibly can this evening.
There he is again. Thompson. Oh, and it's 1-0! And what a return! Smith. And Reece still. Heskey, chance for Liverpool. Heskey, 1-1. Henrik Larsson at Thompson. Yes! The shot got more room now. And Celtic surely are in the semi-final.
No mistake would be made, as it took just 2 minutes for Henrik Larsson to further establish his Parkhead legend in the first leg before a European away performance for the ages 7 days later at Anfield, as Alan Thompson and John Hartson put a Celtic side without Larsson or Sutton through to the semis. A similar route would be needed through Portuguese outfit Boa Vista.
Behind from Martelinho. Oh, and it's sliced in. That's a nice touch. Larsson, yes! Beautifully played by Stilian Petrov. Good save. Hartson, the medical man. Larsson must be! It is!
And the same method applied. A Larsson goal in the home leg, but a backs against the wall performance back in Porto. For the first time since '67, Celtic were into a European final. Awaiting them would be FC Porto and a certain Jose Mourinho.
This is Alenichev, and that's an amazing block, but on the follow-up. And the boys in hoops at the start of the second half, and Larson's got away here. Oh, he scored! Valharan committed. Here's a real chance.
It's cutting a lot. It is Larsen! He's done it again! Dele. And he is off. The goalkeeper's done well. Dele! But it's not all over.
In a classic string of UEFA Cup finals, this stood right up there. Jose Mourinho had announced himself to the rest of Europe, Celtic the unfortunate victims in his tyrannical sweeping through the continent. Whilst he would graduate to that big-eared trophy the following season, Celtic actually would take part, easing through Lithuanian and Hungarian opposition in the qualifiers, only to be handed one of the more difficult groups. A point at home to the almighty Bayern Munich, whilst also defeating both a prime Lyon outfit and a decent Anderlecht at Parkhead, laid on a final matchday shootout at the Stade de Gerland. The winner would be in the last 16, the loser funneled into the UEFA Cup.
Up and pounds home his first Champions League goal of the season, and at Pochettino's long-range effort has the steam to beat Magnus. Lucky picks it up, promptly beats Coupe. Nino put to the spot, and he makes it 3-2 with time.
8 days later, less devastatingly, the League Cup would be surrendered at Easter Road to Hibs, but it would be the last meaningful game Celtic would be beaten in for 4 months. That meant ruining Rangers in the New Year's derby, eliminating Rangers from the Scottish Cup on March the 7th, beating fucking Barcelona 3 days later, eliminating that same Barca team with a mesmeric 0-0 draw in the Camp Nou, before pitching up at Ibrox 4 days later and all but putting the league to bed. Then it was Villarreal and a 1-1 draw via a Henrik Larsson goal at home, which was a nice callback to the previous year's run to the final. Unfortunately, there would be no such luck at the Madrigal. The up-and-coming Villarreal team, soon to be Champions League semi-finalists, would eliminate Celtic 2-0. If they thought they were unlucky in being drawn the group they had done in the 03-04 season, then get a load of this shit. Both Barcelona and AC Milan. Then you chuck in a decent Shakhtar Donetsk team undervalued by UEFA coefficient, and you have last in the group and no Europe after Christmas. Once the continental game was put away for another season, Celtic could focus on catching Rangers. Between a loss at Ibrox on November the 20th and a loss at Parkhead to Rangers on February the 20th, Celtic won all but one game, but that potentially 12-point swing meant Celtic were chasing heading into the business end of the season. It would comfortably require 90+ points, while Celtic were pristine in picking up another Scottish Cup, this time against Dundee United, and they had grabbed a 2-1 win at Ibrox in the last Old Firm game of the season. There had been a needless home defeat to Hibs on the final day of April. The lay of the land tantalising into May 22nd. Celtic travelled to Fir Park, Rangers were also away at Easter Road. Celtic had a 2-point advantage, Rangers had a 4-goal advantage. To win the title, you would almost certainly need to win your match. The SPL trophy was in a helicopter, hovering over Scotland.
Here comes that to Robo, drive to the cross, and cross it home, and there at the near post, and no ball. McDonald scored for Motherwell! He's on his own, Britton's in the middle, wants to cut back, could be a second, here's McDonald again, he scored again! And we're travelling the championship, and it's all over, and Alec McLeish is swamped by his backroom staff.
We're finished with Scottish football for the rest of the year, but we'll be back in February. Until then, watch this playlist.